would be available, and so it would. That would be a very quick fix, but it would probably not be a political one, and it would not be one that would be accepted by the majority of taxpayers. And so I don't think that the Minister of Finance was answering the question or attempting to answer the question that has been put to us. What he was saying was, yes, we know there are sources of finance, but we're asking the Commission to find which are the most desirable and most available sources which the government should call upon. And that is indeed what we're trying to do in the long term. I spoke a little bit earlier about the consequences of fee-free education. It is not for us to determine what those consequences are, but any solution that is one which provides for a feasible fee-free system must, of course, take some of the consequences into consideration. Because if we were not to do that, it would be to ignore reality and to impose a fee-free regime which just doesn't have any regard to the true state of affairs at all. And therefore, you must, and the students must bear in mind that there are certain consequences of fee-free education that will apply no matter what anybody may say about it. The first is, of course, a substantially greater number of students coming into institutions of higher education. That will mean that there has to be not just an increase in the amount of tuition fees, whether coming from students or coming from government, but there will have to be provision of a greater infrastructure. Buildings, libraries, very expensive items which are very often sourced overseas. There will have to be additional support facilities for all the additional infrastructure. There will have to be added provision of academic and administrative staff. There will have to be some serious consideration given to the fact that the more students you pour into education and the less money you have, the more likely you are to reduce the quality of the education. At present, the return on education is measured by student success, and student success in this country is at a very low ebb. It's very poor, quite frankly. And all of those things need to be addressed through the education system. They can't be addressed by money. So you will understand that in the end, the job of this commission is a balancing task. It's a matter of seeing where money is available, finding where money is available, and where it can best be sourced for the purpose of providing fee-free higher education in one form or another. That would be, in the end, part of the recommendations. But the matter of priorities, of course, determines everything, and priorities are a political decision. The government will have to decide whether education is more important than fee-free higher education, or improved basic education, or whether the priorities allow it to look to all three at the same time, and if so, how the cake should be divided up. It's not for us to determine how those priorities work, though we will hear evidence in due course, and we have to some extent already heard evidence from financial arms of government as to the pressures on the government. You can only assume from what I have told you that in the end we will make a recommendation to the State President which will attempt to answer in the best interests of the students and the country, which requires the skills of those students, what the way forward should be. it's far too early at this stage to suggest to you that the decision will be in one direction or another. That is all the statement that I can make at this stage. If anybody wishes to ask any questions, they're free to do so.
Barry?
Good afternoon, Judge. Barry Bateman, Eyewitness News. Are you not concerned that you are having questions related to legitimacy? And this comes primarily from the position that has been adopted by students, where they simply do not recognize the Commission. That's why they've gone and disrupted in East London, in Cape Town, where their demand is quite simply free education. The question you should be asking, although it's set by the President, I appreciate that, they say the question should be how to find free education, not establish whether it's feasible. In this climate of questions around legitimacy, how do you anticipate then the students to play any meaningful role in this, to get them on board? And once you finally do make recommendations, that it will in fact be accepted and we won't into another round of violent demonstrations that we've seen?
Well, the first presenter to the Commission was SARS, South African Union of Students. They presented and left, and we were then informed that there would be no more participation from the student side. Yesterday I heard the representative of SARS saying that it is now understood that there is a long-term goal that is being sought by the Commission, and that the intermediate answers which the Minister has provided should be looked at as intermediate solutions, and that there should, as I understood the spokesman, be cooperation from the students as far as the long-term goal is concerned. And if I understood that person correctly, then I would welcome that attitude. And I'd like the students to re-look at the whole idea, because we're not against fee-free education. The members of the Commission, I can speak for myself and for my fellow members, would love to see all students have fee-free education. It's not our task to make that decision, it's our task to find the money if it can be found. And in that we will act on the advice that is given to us. The question is whether they will cooperate after the report comes out.
Among the questions of which
Your speculation is as good as mine.
Good day, Judge. Good day, everyone. My name is Johnny Sai. I'm with African News Agency. My question is more like the question is, are you not concerned that the report you oriented to the President will be affected by the events that are happening currently? Because when you go to do the hearings, they are disrupted. Those disruptions, will they have a bearing in your end report? And secondly, what has necessitated you, what has led you to address us today? Is it the events of the last days or the threats of violence currently happening? It doesn't let you to come and make a statement today.
No, I've been asked for several weeks to come. In fact, more than a month ago I was first asked to come, and I just wasn't available to come. It's entirely unrelated to anything that has happened, and I'm totally uninfluenced by anything that was done or said yesterday. I have only mentioned it because it seems that the solution that the Minister has put forward to some extent accords with what we have been hearing thus far at a very early stage. Am I afraid that the eventual report will be influenced in any way by the disruptions? Only insofar as the students' participation is withheld from us in consequence of the disruptions. I can only see advantage from having the students' participation. If they have anything good to offer, and I'm sure they have, then let us hear it. Otherwise, we will bring in a report which says that we have been shortchanged by people who have the greatest interest in what we're deciding.
Thank you. My name is Todi from ENCA. Judge, some educational experts have argued that this commission is being headed by people who do not have is there no way that, or perhaps I should ask the question, when do you expect to conclude the commission? Is there no way that it can be speeded up?
Well, let me answer the first question. I think it's a fair criticism. I was not asked whether I had any particular experience in education when I was asked to take this job. My commissioners, I don't think, were asked either. They were simply asked whether they would do the work. We are not without expert advice. We are advised by at least 2 expert witnesses from the Council on Higher Education, and so are our evidence leaders. And I have to say that the evidence leaders have gone to a great deal of trouble to research the project, because they too are necessarily advocates for the cause. They too have to build up a body of knowledge in order to present the case. And they are sharing that knowledge with us, although it may not all be put before the Commission in due course as evidence. And so, yes, it's all a progressive process of informing ourselves as to the state of education in this country and what is required. But then perhaps educationalists are not the people who are required, because the question is very much a financial issue. One can draw all sorts of disciplines into the final solution, and it may be that we are not the best people. You can always find better, no doubt of that. But we've been asked to do the job, and we'll do it to the very best of our ability. We are all 3, I think, reasonably intelligent people, aware of what goes on in this world, and politically sane. We know how people react, and we know how governments react, and we know what students need. We've all been through university, and we think that we are sufficiently open-eyed and open-eared to listen to the people who talk to us and to see their points of view. Pardon? The speed of the Commission. I indicated to you that context is very important, and the way in which the Commission has been structured is to ensure that the final question, that's to say the cardinal question that has been put to us as to whether the whether free fees are feasible, needs to be seen in context and will only be answered when the whole context has been laid. Now, the evidence leaders have laid out a plan. We know how many days we wish to sit. We know what subject matters we are going to deal with at each stage. And that will bring us to a timeline which was specifically requested from the President when we had worked out the schedule, to the end of April, end of April or May, I'm not sure which it is, and then we will have 2 months to submit the report. And the report must be submitted by the end of June. Now, can we bring that forward? It depends on what the evidence leaders find is available by way of evidence. They may advise us at a certain stage that they wish to accelerate the process, but at this stage there is a set timetable, which I am not prepared to interfere with, because I am being advised by the evidence leaders in that regard. Yes, sir.
Obviously, a lot of submissions in the commission, are coming through and saying that and decrying the quality of the matriculate, coming into the university system. Are you not finding it prudent, to call in the Department of Basic Education, to sort of engage it on this specific, question of quality of the matriculate?
I must say that the participants have been fairly reluctant to criticize other levels of education. There has been a suggestion that basic education can be improved, and that it needs to be improved. But it's not the function of this commission, and we don't have any, what shall I say, our powers don't extend to investigating basic education. We may be told that what comes to the doors of the university is perhaps not as well educated as it can be. And we do know for sure that the universities are virtually all of them putting in place bridging programs to assist the students who come out of schools. But that is at this stage where we have been taken to, and nobody has asked us to go further. And although it is a concern to us that basic education may not be as good as it ought to be, there's very little we can do about it, because we have to provide, or we have to look at the funding position on the basis of what we have.
Judge Anton Meyer from Pretoria FM. My question relates to the point you just made about the powers of the Commission. Can the Commission, let me just say, there's countries that are already providing fee-free education to university students. Can the Commission look at funding models? Will you accept or receive submissions from international universities or other countries on how they fund and implement a fee-free model in their countries?
Yes, we already have expert evidence before us, and we have a lot of documentation relating to such systems. Very few countries, except perhaps some of the Nordic countries, have totally fee-free education. Almost all work on some sort of repayment basis. But we will look at all of these, and we certainly will not wind up the Commission until we've done so.
Sorry, Chairperson. Just to add on what the judge has said to Mr. Nkosi's question on the basic education department, they are even presenting to us in the next session of our public hearings, so that our evidence leaders would have a chance to engagement on the issues that you have raised and others.
Thank you, Mr. Ndwangwe.
Good afternoon, Judge and fellow colleagues. My name is Neo Hon. I'm from the College of Education at the University of South Africa. What I'd like to ask today is, what is the Commission's definition of a student? And does your definition include postgraduate students, postdoc students, and lifelong learning students? Thank you very much.
With regard to all but lifelong learning students, the answer is yes. Insofar as what you term a lifelong learning student is concerned, I consider myself a lifelong learning student. I'm not. It's not a term I'm familiar with. But if you're talking about people who wish to get involved in the adult education system, then those people are students as far as we're concerned as well. We are interested in all the persons who would attend university, would attend the technicons or the technical colleges, and all those who will attend community colleges, which would include persons, I assume, who are lifelong learners. We haven't yet got to the university of the third age.
So just as a last question, Judge, Tony again from ENCA. Are you finding, or is there sentiment coming through, that with all the wastage in government, whether it be through corruption or maladministration, is there a sentiment that money for free higher education must be found, given the kind of wastage that we are told every day? And if so, how strong is that sentiment coming through?
The answer is yes. But I can't express a view as to the strength of the sentiment. It is a sentiment that has been put to us by several presenters. And no doubt, if we were to listen to have the views of the students, we would hear it from them as well. And we think it's, well, I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but it appears to be a perfectly justified sentiment. All governments are less than efficient.
So you're saying that that view has not come from the students because of their...
Simply because they haven't participated.
You're at liberty to tell us where it came from? From which court?
I don't recall. Offhand, I don't recall. But it's something which I don't think is far out of the common ken. Everybody knows that government is not as efficient as it should be. That there are degrees of criticism as to how inefficient it is. But there's no doubt that vast savings can be achieved in government. I think the government realizes that itself. Whether it's doing enough is another matter.
Any further questions, ladies and gentlemen? That's it. Thank you very much for attending. The judge will be available for Afrikaans, I'm not sure, sir.
Yeah.
Is jy gemaklik dan?
Ja.
Just to summarize in Afrikaans.
As dit nodig is, ja.
Okay, thank you.
Wat wil jy nou hou?
We have an Afrikaans.
Yeah.
Well, we've been listening to Judge Jonathan Hehe there, providing an update on the Commission's process as well as the next leg of the hearings. But really what came out of that is the judge describing what he called constructive assistance that is lacking in this issue, and that the Commission is really tasked with looking for a long-term answer to the fees crisis. And he says that they have been looking at the most desirable sources from government in order to make this a long-term fee structure, in order to make it feasible over the long term. He did say that he is appealing to students to bear in mind that there are certain consequences for free education, one of those being that there will be an increase in the number of students at universities, at institutions of higher learning, which means an increase in infrastructure, an increase in academic and admin staff, with the possible lowering of the quality of education. So all of that will need extra funding, is something that the Commission is also looking at. And he really stressed the fact that they are appealing for cooperation from students, but in terms of a way forward, that cannot be directed yet, as they are still working on this, and a way forward is yet to be revealed. We'll take a short break. Stay with us. We'll have more for you coming up just after this.